拾え。拾ったらそれが合図になる。あの鉄球、回転していた。
Now this looks insane, and you might think to yourself, oh, well this is the result of stand ability from Gyro. No, that's not the case here. In fact, this involves some physics and other fictional elements. While getting just the basics, Gyro Zeppeli originates from Naples, Italy, as well as the technique spin. The spin technique is exclusive to the Zeppeli family. The spin's intended purpose is for combat, whether that be for breaking another's armor or healing with other stuff. It's superior rotational energy that Gyro seemingly mastered and can effortlessly use. Though spin doesn't need an item to channel and expel the energy, Gyro commonly just pairs them with steel balls because they're easier to use. Spin energy can be transferred to either people, structured, or, as how Gyro's been using it, items such as the steel balls. The steel ball is around 7 centimeters in diameter, and we can see that volume is 4/3 times pi times r cubed. Our radius would be 3.5, and if we insert that into our equation, we can see that its volume would be around 179.59 centimeters cubed. The average density of solid steel is around 7.75 to 8.05. So, I'll use 7.9, right in the middle. Now we can solve for mass, which we can use mass equals density times volume. Once we substitute the values, we can see that the mass of the steel balls are around 1,418.761 grams. Now that we know the properties of the steel ball alone, we need to figure out the physics behind spin energy. Wait! Let's go beyond just from what the anime tells us about the spin itself and dive a little bit into the manga. And stay with me, this is gonna take some explaining. In Steel Ball Run, spin is basically controlled rotational energy. The user makes an object rotate in a very specific, stable way, usually by trying to follow the golden rectangle or golden ratio. In simple terms, the better the spin, the more energy the object can carry and transfer into whatever it hits. The steel ball is useful for this because it can hold that rotation, it's easier to use, and can easily travel through the air and pass on that energy to its intended target. I'll be splitting the results into two separate answers. The first one, Gyro utilizing the spin, and the other, Gyro not using the spin. I'll be starting with Gyro not using the spin, and then work our way up from that. First, we begin with obtaining the kinetic energy of the steel ball. Kinetic energy is a half times mass times volume squared. Earlier we calculated that the mass was 1.419 kilograms. For this example, we will be deciding that the Gyro's hardest throw will have got the balls going at around 45 meters per second. This is fairly reasonable as Gyro is well trained and that's a possible high speed. So, with the information we have, let's substitute it into our formula. Kinetic energy equals a half times 1.419 times 45 squared. So, with that we would get 1,437 joules. And now, we need to determine the force, which we can use work equals force times distance in order to get force equals energy divided by distance. We need to know when the steel ball stops. So let's say around 3 meters. And it's somewhat realistic in a realistic scenario. So, if force equals 1,437 divided by 3, to which around equals 479 newtons, to which we can add on to the fact that Gyro can utilize both his steel balls, which will add up to a total of 958 newtons. Now, this may look huge, and It is, but this isn't nearly enough to smash through someone's skull so easily. This right here would be enough to result in a concussion and sits right at the lower threshold for a skull fracture. Now, why don't we move on to including the spin energy. There is no precise or broad statement on how fast spin rotates things. So, for the sake of this calculation, we'll be going with 20,000 rotations per minute, or RPM. And this doesn't and will not include heavy and manga spoilers, as if I were to, then the answer would be very clear, so there's no need to do that. First off, let's convert this number into rads times seconds. We'll take the angular velocity, which is 20,000, times 2 pi over 60, to which we get around 2,904 rad per second. For the rotational kinetic energy, it would be kinetic energy rotational equals 1 over 2 inertia times angular velocity. The moment of inertia of a solid sphere is 2 over 5 times the mass times radius squared, to which would be inertia equals 2 over 5 times 1.419 times 0.035 squared, which would equal to 0.000695 kilograms times mass squared. Now, plug that into rotational kinetic energy. Kinetic energy rotational equals 1 over 2 times 695 times 10 over negative 6, which is just the, I'll think of it later, times 2,904 squared, which would equal around 1,524 joules. Woo! That's a lot. Now that we add the forward motion energy and the spin itself together, energy total would be 1,437 plus 1,524, which will equal 2,961 joules, or if you round it up to about 3,000 joules. If we apply the same distance, it would be 987 newtons, or almost 1,000, for a single steel ball while spinning. And with two of them, that would equal up to almost 2,000, with it being 1,974 newtons, which is very much deadly, but in realistic terms isn't enough to kill. But that's without including the effects of spin energy, which would be more than enough to kill as his intended targets. I don't want to see what the body would look like afterwards. Anyways, we haven't concluded with this video by answering the main question of how much total force can Gyro Zeppeli unleash with his steel balls without involving the obvious answer.